Hey everybody, I'm Paul. Welcome to Airwolf to Rewolf.
And I'm John Magerl. Season 2, Episode 2, Firestorm.
Firestorm.
Interesting episode, I thought, Paul.
Mm,
We open up with a scene of them doing some trick flying in a Santini helicopter. Point of the scene is pretty much to establish that Dom really wants to fly Airwolf, and they haven't been flying it much.
yeah, he's a little upset about it.
He wants to get back to his baby. Airwolf is
You
his
can't
baby.
just leave it to rust,
No. And listen, honestly, the whole maintenance flight argument did seem compelling to me. He gets a call from a waitress, we find out, named Angie, who is concerned about a friend of his named Eddie. And they go to a bar, and Eddie has started a fight with a bunch of young people. They break it up. Eddie is clearly an alcoholic. I think it's fair to say he's being presented that way. And he is a conspiracy theorist, aliens in the sky thing, which was a pretty common thing in the 80s. Like, I remember.
Well,
Go ahead.
he's talking to himself in the bar. He's like, "Oh, the lights!" And then these guys are like looking at him like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh, you want to fight?"
Yeah.
And then he does this fight thing where he just
He's
like,
weirdly aggressive. So we bring Eddie out to his trailer. Hawk's with him. Hawk's with Dom and Eddie. They drive out there. He puts him into bed. They go home. There's some discussion between Hawk and Dom of the relative value of helping Eddie. And then Eddie gets blown up. Right. That's pretty much the next scene. Eddie sees some lights in the sky and then gets blown
yeah,
up. And he wakes up in a hospital bed, and he's shockingly okay for an old man that's been blown up. Um,
it's fine.
the working theory on what happened to him was that he fell in a ditch drunk. Um, it feels like there would be distinctions in the symptoms of that, but we can keep going. Dramatic scene where Eddie is like, "Believe me, you have to believe me. Like, there's really something going on," and Dom, played as always wonderfully by Ernest Borgnine, does seem to earnestly say he believes him. And then, kind of in the next scene, really seems to be using it as an excuse to fly Airwolf again. So Hawk agrees, and Dom and Hawk take Airwolf up to check out the area. An area that's pretty close, apparently pretty close to their base of operations. So they fly around, they take pictures, thermal, standard images. They take it back. They save the images on a CD, which I wanted to note, like super high tech for the time. And then Dom goes out to check on it. And they go out, and he goes outside.
Yeah, and while Dom is doing this, right? String is back at the
This is the
at
back and
the
forth, yes.
at the hangar where he's printing. He has a very fancy printer.
So this is incredibly. This is the CD taken up to another notch in super
Right.
high tech '90s technology, where he has this, display device where he's watching the film and able to push a button, and it prints out a beautiful glossy image of what was on the screen, which we're still not great at, but certainly wasn't something that people had at home at that point in
Yeah, it was
time.
a nice
In the 80s.
printing.
Well, I guess in the
Yeah,
90s. Oh, whatever. Um,
80s.
yeah, it was a beautiful printing. It was very nice. It comes in later. It's pulled back out after, because Dom. What we learn now is there are lights in the sky. Dom goes outside, and well, the audience knew this. Dom didn't. Lights are in the sky. Oh my God! This horrible noise happens, and then there's a whiteout, and then we do the Hawk thing. He sees the map, and he goes out to check. So finally we go to the scene of the crime, because notably we didn't go to the scene of the crime when we were checking out the area. Like,
No, he got blown up by like a missile.
yeah,
And
and I feel like they would have noticed that if they had gone there instead of just flying around taking pictures. But hey, listen, I think that's one
well,
of the
they
lessons of the
did they
episode.
did have photos of structures. They knew that there were some structures
Yeah,
around.
which turned out to be a military base that had
Pa-
an intercontinental missile and radioactive materials.
Paramilitary, John.
Paramilitary,
It's not
yes.
paramilitary.
Very paramilitary. Exceedingly paramilitary.
Yeah.
So led by a former general, though. We'll get to that. In effect now, the military guys that we just brought up, through a series of events, catch all three of our heroes, right? Our guest hero, Eddie, and Dom and Hawk. Dom and Hawk are put into torture via use of the truth serum of some kind.
We've seen injections happen here on this show before.
Yeah, truth serum was a real sort of thing in at this time. just sort of a nice device for them to use. Baddies used it, that way the good guys didn't bear any moral responsibility for giving up whatever they had to give up, or
And the lady is like, if you give him another dose of this, he's gonna die.
And General's like, I don't care.
He's like, go ahead, shoot him up.
Bring it. They Dom and Hawk do the classic pretend to fight. Guard comes over, beat him up through a door, and then escape. Dom gets shot. They escape, but Dom is shot in the escape. And Eddie, who previous to now we have learned has a tragic pilot backstory, where he crashed through no fault of his own, but people were hurt, and he never could fly again.
Yeah,
but now
he couldn't get back up there.
But now, to save the world, Eddie has to fly. So Dom eventually guilts Eddie into helping Hawk go stop the intercontinental missile, which the crazy general is going to shoot at Moscow. So he starts the countdown, and it's a race. Airwolf versus the missile. Let's see if Airwolf can blow it up before the missile takes off.
John, you see the television series Game of Thrones? Have you seen this one?
I only like half of the first season. No.
Are you serious? You've only seen half of the first season?
I read the books, and I wasn't enjoying the.
Okay, so let me give you a little context here. In season 6 of Game of Thrones, Jon Snow, who's like one of the main guys,
I know Jon. Yeah.
He leaves the wall and he goes north to try to find this king of the zombie guys, right?
Yeah.
And the whole season is him going north to try to find this guy. It's a whole season, John. It's a whole season. In season 7, like episode 1 or 2, he escapes from the zombie guy and he runs back to the wall.
Feels like you didn't need that whole season.
Right? It's like he just like gets out. He just like gets away. He just like runs back. He's back to the wall. Between episodes, he just gets back.
They stopped writing the books, man. Like, I don't. It's just like, yeah.
No, but the point is, in this scenario, String escapes, and he hops on this little motorbike.
Yeah.
And he just like, the missile is the missile isn't in countdown, but it's in prepare to countdown.
Yeah.
Right.
It's in the process.
He says prepare to countdown. So he's not quite in countdown yet, but he's in the prepare to countdown stage. And String, during prepare to countdown, is able to drive all the way over to Airwolf.
Well, Airwolf was very close. They established that.
And he changes into his flight suit, and then changes back out of his flight suit.
There's some air to ground defenses. Airwolf does what Airwolf does. And in a dramatic fashion, just as the missile takes off, they initiate a nuclear explosion, which appears to atomize all the bad guys and appears to hit Airwolf with basically the same force that atomized the bad guys. But Paul, what happens to Eddie and Hawk and Airwolf? Nothing. Good to go. Joking a second later. Ha. Look what we did. That was awesome. Hawk driving. Wait, okay. We need to stop.
You ever see the movie Return of the Jedi?
No, Paul. I've never seen Return of the Jedi.
Okay, listen. In this movie, this guy, Han Solo, and he is in this camp, and he wants to destroy the shield generator.
Yes. Okay? I recall this.
So they get into a scuffle, blah, blah, blah. They trick them, all this stuff. They end up last second, this other guy, Lando, is flying around with all the ships in the space. Han is able to destroy the shield generator, but, he runs out very famously, like in this weird running way, out of the shield generator, and he like jumps over a log.
Yeah.
And then the thing blows up.
And he's fine. The log, it's a super log.
You see the size of the explosion that happens? It's like a gigantic explosion. And Han is like 15, 20 feet away.
Yeah, but famously, Wood on that particular moon of Endor has incredible power absorption abilities. And he knew that.
Right. But this reminded me of that moment.
Yes, it is very much a like that shouldn't have worked. And listen, like this isn't to be overly critical. This is as you point out in one of the most famous successful franchises in the history of everything. They
Mm.
pulled a similar thing. It's not
Oh,
the
yeah.
end of the world. It was
It happens.
and they drive out to Eddie. They drop Eddie off at his trailer. It's great. He goes in, and I'm glad they didn't do the thing I was expecting. Eddie goes in, and he immediately finds alcohol, and he's about to take a drink, and then Dom
Right.
walks in, and it's like basically, I need to let you figure this out for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And leaves, which I think is there's wisdom to that, and the episode ends on that note, which is I think we'll get into. I think wildly interesting that
Would
like
you say it
those
was?
things
Would
are
you say
next
it
to
was
each other.
would you say it was a sobering note?
Okay, I I can't with you. You lucky. See, here's the good thing: we're dads, so we are constitutionally permitted to do horrible dad jokes. So, Paul, generally at this point, we talk about our three big things. Do you want to go first, since I did the summary?
Look, John, I'm no dentist.
That's true.
You know where I'm going with this? Do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't know where you're going with this. I have no idea where you're going
I'm
with
not a
this.
dentist, John. I'm not a dentist. But I know. I know that when you clench your jaw continuously, it's a problem. Like 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 people will break their teeth
Yeah.
and they have a clenched jaw, it gives them headaches, migraines.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of negative health effects that are associated with jaw clenching. And at some point, and because I don't think this was a unconscious reaction or a subconscious kind of physiological response to something. I think John Michael Vincent made the choice that he liked the look
Of the clenched jaw.
of that
It's
ripple of
sexy.
muscle.
It's sexy.
We saw John multiple jaw clenches in this episode. I want to say in the order of 4 to 5 jaw clenches. And I got to say at this point I'm concerned that John Michael Vincent is not going to get through the rest of the season of Airwolf without having to need a endodontic intervention.
Maybe you're keying into the real reason for the downfall of Airwolf. You know, we only make it through this season. This is the last season. Well, there's the controversial third season.
Yeah,
of
right,
Canada,
right.
but
But
this is the last
he's on.
season of the original team.
This is a downward slope here.
Okay.
It's a spiral that's very hard to pull yourself out of. Once you start clenching that jaw, yeah, it's not good.
No, and I can relate my first point to yours. I think this episode is a cry for help from the Airwolf about really getting back to fundamentals, right? Like just going back to the beginning. They've gotten a little over dependent on this wonderful machine they have. They're not doing the maintenance they need to be doing. Just because there are just some kind of inexcusable choices. They begin an investigation without going to the scene of the incident, where they could have immediately confirmed that there was an actual explosion and acted with a lot more care. I'm a little concerned that Super Airwolf didn't notice a nuclear missile when it flew. Like immediately, I feel like an alarm should have gone off. Like, whoop, whoop,
Well,
whoop,
there was a
radioactive
net.
materials.
There was a net over it.
I feel like just see fundamentals, a net. And then, as I've referenced many times, I mean, 3 military men. I know they train them in first aid, on taking care of when you have bullet wounds. They've all been in active duty military. Like, and no one tried to stop the bleeding? No
The
one
best
put
part-
pressure on the wound? Like,
No, but the best part is when Eddie finally decides he's gonna get an Airwolf. Did you clock this, John? He pats Ernest on the shoulder. He pats Tom on the shoulder. He's like, all right, buddy, I'm gonna go do it. And he's like, oh
yeah, it was so like just someone get like a rag and push it a little bit. Like, what is happening? Like, it was
they say
so
that
weird.
best thing for something like that is a tampon.
Yeah, I have actually heard. Yes, 100%. It's intelligent to bring those camping with you. You know, as for emergencies, they have several uses. Like, you know, water retention is good too. You know, you can use them to travel and squeeze it back out. That's a weird.
Look, I mean,
digression.
you don't want to be drinking out of a tampon, but if you needed to,
You gotta do what you
it's
gotta
there.
do. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, you got it. You know,
I watched way too much. Like who was the guy? Not Bear Grylls because he sucked, but the one guy who did it legit. Do you remember who I'm talking about? Okay, not important.
no clue. But
Okay,
I've
good.
seen Alone. It's a TV show, Alone,
Hmm.
and they have to like survive alone for days out.
Isn't it Naked and Alone?
No, no, that's Naked and Alone.
Oh, there's two.
This
There's a
one's
different one.
this one's just Alone.
I feel like you're messing with me here.
It's not just Alone. It's just the name of it is Alone. It's not called just Alone. It's
Okay,
called,
I don't
there's
think
like
this is.
10 seasons or 12
I
seasons of
think
it.
yeah.
Literally,
Okay,
they
we're.
drop people off in the woods and they're like,
Hmm.
you can bring 10 things with you.
Okay. Okay.
The person who survives the longest without calling for help, calling for
Yeah.
the chopper to get them, wins $500,000.
Okay. I feel like you should be
It's
on the
pretty
show.
it's pretty good. No, no, John. No. I don't have the stomach for it. I wouldn't be able to like these people like shoot deer and bears with arrows. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean that's insane. But okay. Like
There was one season where this guy it was like day 50 or whatever, and he's like, I'm just gonna hang out in my tent and not eat. And he just stayed in his shelter and he just didn't eat for like 25 days. And
that's insane, isn't it?
he like outlasted everybody.
Okay. I
Nuts.
mean that sounds crazy. Yeah. That's all right.
And no
Listen, we gotta get.
nobody
Okay.
on that show has brought a tampon. Nobody.
Wow. Crazy. Well, I mean,
Despite your advice.
yeah, I'm talking about an emergency situation. I think you could come if you had the choice of any 10 things in the world, you could come up with 10 things better than a tampon. But I digress. So, it's your turn, buddy.
Donald P. Belisario is an expert at what
Hmm.
he's done. He is a real pro. What we have here is an example of a story that has no real motivation, right? Like Airwolf is in retirement at this point. Like they're not taking Airwolf out. They're not flying Airwolf. We don't see Alex Cord. We don't see
Hmm.
Morello. We don't like they are quite literally a rudderless ship. They're taking Airwolf out to like help out a drunk guy, right?
Well,
And this
they
leads,
don't take, well, yeah, I guess. They investigate for the bad
yeah,
guy. Yeah.
yeah. So like, this leads us to a nuclear detonation on American soil, right? But that notwithstanding, we Airwolf doesn't have a mission right now,
Yeah.
and that's why the fight scene in this episode seems so mindless. Like the battle at the end of the episode it's just Airwolf flying around blowing stuff up. It's so this I get so much pleasure out of watching it. It's just so wonderful to watch, but it is totally utterly mindless TV. It's goofy. And
Yeah.
I think that comes from the fact that the show doesn't have a direction at this point.
Paul, that's really interesting because actually that really relates to my second point, which is sort of a different theory for the same thing, which is I see in particular in this episode, and I think this is true of sort of the entirety of Airwolf, the pull between two different shows. So you have a relatively cartoonish action show targeted mostly at younger people. That is what you would describe as what you just put as the attack scene, just like very video game, boom, 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 blow shit up, big explosion, cool.
Right.
Everybody's,
Yeah.
it's exciting, it's fun. And then the next scene, though, right, is this really realistic character-driven depiction of alcoholism where, like, they didn't take the easy way out, where, like, at the end of the 48-minute episode, like, alcoholism was solved. Like, the whole storyline was like, my dad was an alcoholic. Like, there was real stuff, like him having an extra stash and then an extra stash. You know what I mean? Him knowing that it was time, that he was killing himself, and him not being able to stop. Like, that was really realistic, and the portrayals were realistic and pained when they were not in Airwolf. And then in Airwolf, they were like sort of cartoonish and a little over the top, and that was the jarring part for me. It was the the tone, the wild tonal shifts between Airwolf surviving a nuclear explosion easily, like without even having to do like a flight correction or something, just like woof, we're cool. And then the next scene is this Ernest Borgnine. I don't know the actor's name, but whoever portrayed Eddie, like having
Right.
this like really realistic interaction about like having to let your alcoholic friend like be on his own and stop helping him. And that's just those things next to each other are jarring. It's just really jarring, and like they're both good, but I don't know. I think like where it may have been less successful was there was no match. Like if we go back and look at an earlier episode, the Dove episode, the To Fight a Dove, I think it was called,
Okay.
with
Yeah.
the ear shooter and the Bond villain, like there was a tonal match there, right? The villains were arch, they were big, so like the cartoonish Airwolf scenes, of like the fun video game stuff fit. It all matched together like it was supposed to like marry
And
well.
I think what you're referring to, someone who is into screenplays might call the A story and the B story,
Hmm.
right? So in this in this example, what's the A story and what's the B story? It's a little bit muddled.
I think the A story is the Eddie story. I think the A story is the Eddie story, and I think that's the problem. Probably, I think maybe
Right.
that's what we're finding is that when Airwolf struggles the most when the A story is not about Airwolf. The last thing I'll say about this, to put a bow on it, I liked both parts of the episode. I just didn't necessarily love them together in one episode.
Yeah. That brings me kind of to my third point. And my third point is a question to you, John, because
Okay.
you're a very observant guy, and you read into this stuff very well. So let me ask you. So when Sandauer abducts Stringfellow Hawk and he injects him full of truth serum, he asks him something. Do you remember what he asks him?
Oh, he says, "Tell me about Firestorm."
Tell me about Firestorm. He says the word Firestorm no less than 10 times.
Yeah, like 30 times. And it's funny because in our previous episode, I made a specific point about how like it was a thing in the 80s to find an excuse to say the name of the episode because it was Sweet Britches.
Yeah. So like, John, why does he ask him that?
I really couldn't tell you, Paul. I got to be honest with you. Like, it seems that he should
Yeah,
know all
right.
about it. Like, it was his thing. It seems like I don't. It is a
I
weird trip.
I stopped the video, right, and rewound the video a little bit and watched it again and stopped it because I was trying to figure out, okay, I couldn't think of an answer that String could have given that would have
and
changed the direction of the story at all. It was so peculiar.
and somehow what it leads to for the story is that Hawk remembers who the general is, and that he was a crazy warmonger who wanted to blow up Moscow. Right? Like
Right.
that's the A to B of it. So it's like it sort of helps the good guys that he gets like truth
But there's
serum.
John, there's absolutely no reason to do that whole scene.
I don't
You
disagree with
could
you.
take John, there's a movie, okay,
Oh, we're doing okay.
called
Another one. Let's go.
um it's called The Force Awakens.
No, no, man.
Okay,
Nope. No, there's not.
look,
No, there's not. I don't believe you.
in the movie The Force
I don't
Awakens, right?
believe you.
At the beginning of the movie, you have a character named Poe, I think,
Hold
and
on. We were supposed to die, but they kept him because everyone liked him a lot.
he's doing something. Then the whole movie happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starkiller Base is about to do whatever
Mm-hmm.
it's doing. And then Poe comes in and he blows up Starkiller Base.
Yeah, because they decided he was going to be popular. Yeah, yep.
Right. The entire middle of the movie
No problem.
is meaningless to the actual action of the film. It's not connected in any way.
That tracks. Yeah.
But there's no, and that's what I felt about this moment. This moment is like the entirety of Force Awakens. Like you could
Okay.
delete this, you could delete this whole thing.
Yeah.
You could delete this whole chunk, and the story of the episode doesn't change.
No.
As in The Force Awakens, where you could delete The Force Awakens.
Do you think
And
maybe he says something else in that scene? Like, do you think maybe he was like, "Where's Airwolf" or something, or I don't understand because you're right. What that did for the episode was to establish who the bad guy was, right? Like that's what it did.
yeah. So if we're talking about Airwolf, we're talking about the time period of Airwolf, talking about the 80s. And for me, the thing that spoke loudest about the 80s was the talk about addiction.
Hmm.
Ernest Borgnine, I mean, this is not necessarily about the 80s, but it's more about like the boomer mentality, or I don't know if Ernest Borgnine is even a boomer. He's older than a boomer, but like that mentality of like buck up
Yeah.
and quit.
Yeah.
Damn it. You can do this. And there's nothing wrong with having a positive attitude. But I think we now know that addiction is a mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
and we talk about it very differently now.
Yeah.
I just it was a stark reminder
Mm-hmm.
of the attitudes that prevailed while we were children in terms of addiction.
And we touched on it earlier. Just the '80s version of advanced technology that we see, like the CD recording, like the old school camera, and then the what was the other thing? The printout, the map
Yeah.
printer outer device. Like that was just it was fun. It was fun. It's always fun to see like what people in the '80s thought like was coming next, and sometimes
Well,
sometimes they're right, sometimes they're way off. Highlighted the episode for me,
uh-huh.
right? They do
Wait,
whatever.
let me guess. Let me guess.
Okay, go ahead.
It's when String is like, "You got to fly Airwolf with me, Eddie," and Eddie says, "I can't fly that plane."
No, but that was good. Um, I do like that. Like all of this Eddie need and what he did in the whole thing was push a button twice. Like Clark couldn't have like reached over and pushed the starburst button. Like, is there not one in the front? That seems like a design flaw. But favorite corny action part of the episode, right? We get they do whatever they do to the guard at the door, which it sort of feels like they kind of like mentally sucked out his soul or something. They just kind of like grab him and like him, right?
Yeah.
And then they get out. Dom does the keys. They get out, and then a guard jumps up, right, and he's right there, right,
He says, "Freeze."
right, and then Hawk ninja kicks the guard, like just like, and then guy goes out like a light. He picks up the gun. You gotta love the action
Well,
hero ninja kick.
notably at that in that moment, John, he's very close to String, and he says, "Freeze," and he got the gun. Gun gets kicked. Rat tat 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 tat. We hear
So
machine guns
yeah,
go off, and immediately Sandow is like, "Launch the missile.
yep,
They're loose.
yeah.
Launch the missile."
Well, I mean, he's clever. Who would just be shooting stuff in the air if it weren't for the bad guy? From his perspective, from
And
our
then the
perspective,
girl
the good
who's
guys.
with who happens to be famed actor Robert Stack's daughter,
Hmm,
Elizabeth Stack.
interesting.
She's like, "Well, we didn't do any damage control. We didn't tell the media, whatever." And he's like, just fucking
Yeah.
launch the missile."
We have a reason for this. She's the righteous person that's going to blow up a city full of civilians. Um,
But what's the calculus, John? He launches one single nuclear bomb at Moscow.
have
Then what
you?
happens?
Hey, have you seen the movie War Games?
No.
No. Okay, it's this great movie from the '80s with Matthew Broderick, where this is the central question of the movie, and they answer it at the end. So you're welcome. Go ahead.
All right, I'll watch War Games tonight.
Yes. Do you want me to spoil it? I can tell you what the answer is.
I don't believe in spoilers.
Okay. So I can speak. The answer is
Yeah.
don't shoot nuclear missiles at people. That's a bad
Okay.
idea.
Well, I could have told you that, John.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
Well, John, this was a blast. Airwolf, as always, doesn't disappoint. And
Paul, I have one important last thing to say to you. Get well, you dumb donkey.
he dumb donkeyed him twice. He did the dumb donkey on him.
It was a double dumb donkey. It was something else. All right, buddy. Listen, folks, be kind to us. Like and subscribe. And have a great day. Bye bye.
GN.